Hello everybody, this is Gregor for PreSonus and welcome to this virtual NAMM edition. Unfortunately not in person this year, fingers crossed for the next one. And today I have the honor to show you Studio One 5, and if you've seen one of my Studio One 4 presentations before, maybe even at NAMM last year, then I have to tell you that we have a bunch of new features that are quite spectacular, especially also since version 5.1, our latest version, which I also want to show you a little bit. And let's start off right away with probably the biggest feature of Studio One 5, which is the show page. It's only available in Studio One Professional, but it's probably the most substantial upgrade that we have to talk about. And talking about the show page alone would really take the entirety of my presentation. Fortunately, my good friend and colleague Joel Gilder is going to do an entire segment focusing on the show page and performing with it. So please bear in mind that I'm only going to show you the rough pointers. But let's take a look. So right here we have that show page button. As you can see, we're not just in the start, song and project page anymore in Studio One Professional, but we also have the show page available right now. And that means that we have all the tools we need to not just compose, produce and release our music, but also to perform it live, either on stage or on stream. So if I click on the show page, you find this sort of a hybrid, I'd say, between the project page and the song page, at least visually. And let me talk you through the layout really quickly so you get an idea of what this is about. There's 3 different players that you can choose from. You can either work with backing track players, real instrument players, or virtual instrument players. Backing track players would mean audio tracks, essentially, that can host, like a stereo playback or audio stems that you want to have running throughout your live performance, and then you can play on top of that. We have real instrument players. Those you can use if you have actual audio inputs coming into your interface that you want to process with effects and such. And finally, virtual instrument players. Those are also including external synthesizers such as the ones behind me. And if you're a fan of external synthesizers, then you're going to be particularly delighted to hear how easy it is to integrate them, not just in a show in version 5, but also in a song page in general. You can just go to your browser and then you click on the external instruments folder, which is new. And there you're going to find all of the MIDI outs that you've already configured. I have an entire YouTube video, just Google how to set up external instruments in Studio One and you should find it right away. And once you've done that, select your desired instrument. In my case, there would be the Sequential Pro 2. It's the second one on that keyboard tier here. And drag that into your song and just like that, it's ready to play. And the great thing is that we can assign this on a per setlist item basis. So this means that for every song section or for every song item in our song, we could have a completely different patch that's going to be switched automatically without us having to do that manually. And this is true not just for external synthesizers, but also for real instrument players. So if you're a bass player or a guitarist or vocalist and you want to have a different amp cabinet or vocal chain on a per setlist item basis, you can absolutely do that. If you want to have a different EQ setting for your channels that are hosting stems like backing track players, that's also very easy to do. And this means that you can configure your entire live set ahead of time. And once it's time to perform, all of the things that happen in the background are just hidden from view, and you just get to see the parameters that are actually necessary to adjust manually throughout your performance so that I can really focus on the actual performance and don't have to, interact with my laptop more than with my audience. When we talk about improvements in Studio One 5, however, we cannot just talk about the big flashy features. We also have to talk about all the stuff that has happened under the hood, all the graphic and stability improvements that we have. And especially if you're working on a newer machine, you're really going to reap the benefits of that. Let me show you. So right here is the perfect example project. This is just a demo song that comes with Studio One 5, and I'm on macOS right now on a relatively new Mac, and it is able to harness the power of the new graphics framework Metal that we have since macOS High Sierra. And as you can see, this really pays off incredibly. Look how buttery smooth all these scrolling animations are. It's really incredible. And if you compare that with the kind of zoom performance that we've seen in previous versions is not even close. Also, if you're trying to resize anything like the faders here, you're really gonna notice the benefits. So anything that has to do with rescaling or resizing of windows or changing zoom states is gonna be significantly better on version 5. And of course, that also comes with a couple of downsides, namely that older plugins which do not support graphics hardware acceleration because they haven't been updated frequently, they might work a little bit worse in terms of stability in Studio One 5. But of course, we didn't forget about backward compatibility as we never did. And that's why we have a tick box now that you're gonna find here in Studio One Preferences under General. And here you have the option to enable or disable graphics hardware acceleration. What this ensures is that if you run into any kind of stability problems that you didn't have in version 4, you can simply untick this box and you're gonna get the exact same stability in version 5 that you already enjoyed in version 4. But we don't just have graphical improvements in scaling and zooming. Check out these beautiful new plugin interfaces that we have as well. Aren't they gorgeous? I just love them. For example, the chorus that we had since forever has gotten a complete makeover. Same with the analog delay that has always, in my mind, kind of deserved its own skin. Or the tri-comp. And here the changes aren't purely cosmetic, actually. You can see that it now comes with the state space modeling, saturation, and drive, where we really, from the ground up, make the digital plugins behave like their analog predecessors. But we actually didn't stop there. As you can see, we've redone the entire bass kit as well. So the mix verb, the mix tool, phaser, Pro EQ, compressor, and so forth, they all have this gorgeous new skin now. We haven't updated these since version 2, so this really makes for a tremendous visual upgrade. And what's also really cool is that these skin tones that you see here, they're following your color preferences. So if I would have Studio One in a slightly more purple tint or something like that, you can see that the Pro EQ is actually following that also. And same is true for all the other plugins as well. We also have a dark and a light mode that you can choose from, and you can truly make Studio One your own this way. We also have some very interesting new functionality, such as that all of our dynamic plugins have a sidechain input now, and the Pro EQ comes also with a phase linear low cut, for instance, which is amazing if you want to truly preserve the original phase linearity of your signal without introducing any ripple effects or something like that. Bit processor heavy, but it sounds absolutely fantastic. Another highly requested feature are clip gain envelopes. Let's take a look. So clip gain envelopes allow us to, for example, fix very minor mistakes that we might have in an audio recording, such as this click right here. Won't you let me in? Did you hear that digital clock noise that occurred right there? Won't you let... So with clip gain envelopes, we can solve this issue incredibly quickly. We just right-click this event, choose gain envelope by ticking this box, and now we can just draw in the change that we want to make by inserting points, much like we would do with automation nodes. And then you can just in real time see how you're fixing the error. So I already know that this is going to work perfect. Just play it back. Won't you let me in? And as you can hear, this issue is pretty much solved on the spot. Let me in. And what's so great about this is that this is not just fixed on this event right now, but also on all other events that are currently referencing this clip. So at the same time, I also solved this issue in the chorus, for instance. Moving on, we're now going to talk about one of the most exciting features of version 5, and it's going to make film scoring people and anybody who wants to transcribe their music into classical notation incredibly happy. So what am I talking about here? Well, we now have a third view in the musical editor. Next to the piano roll with the MIDI notation that you're all familiar with, and the drum view, which is very useful for percussive notation, we now also have the score view that many of you might know from our professional notation software, Notion. Now, this is absolutely incredible if you know what transcribing music used to cost. That's absolutely astounding. I have a couple of friends actually who used to get their music transcribed into classical notation, and yeah, they are incredibly happy about this, especially because this feature also includes score printing to PDF and other formats since version 5.1. But I do have to say that if you are in need for an actual classic notation software with lead and lyric sheets and guitar tabs and things like that, then you're still gonna need a professional notation software, Notion 6 of course. We also have the ability now, and I find that incredibly exciting, to show both editor views at once. So we could just detach this classic notation view and then click the pin icon here to keep the editor open. And now I could just open up another musical editor underneath, and now I get both at once. I have the classic notation at the top and the MIDI notation at the bottom. And I think this is incredible also from a music education standpoint. You can also edit this side by side, of course, if you want, and it's completely bidirectional. As you're transposing notes in one view, you're also transposing it in the other. And I love this because everybody now gets to work in the notation that they personally prefer. Studio One 5 also introduced a brand new feature that has been much requested, key switches. Essentially, they allow us to specify a specific articulation that we want for a section. And it's super easy. Click on the key switches lane, and now you just use the drawing tool and specify your desired style of playing. So if I want to start tremolo, and then I want to go into staccato, into sustained short, into trills, tremolo, and then pizzicato, this would sound like this. I can just duplicate that a couple times. It's just so you get the idea. An incredible amount of expressiveness and realism can be introduced into your instruments this way. While we're talking about the musical editor and notation, I also want to point out that we now have these global tracks, such as the marker track or the arranger track or the chord track that we had since a while already, also available in the musical editor right here. So if you want to see your markers or your arranger as you're arranging your MIDI, that's absolutely possible now. And we even have a completely new track, the signature track, where you can mark not just your tempo and beat changes, but also your key changes. We can also show a secondary timeline now. So if you want to see more than just the bar grid, you also want to have your time in seconds visible at all times. This is also possible now. You can also show samples or frames if you want. Moving right along with the next big feature of version 5, which is mixer snapshots. This is something that has been frequently requested, particularly by audio engineers and anybody who has to finish a mix. And if you're a mix engineer, then you know what I'm talking about. At some point in your session, you get into this tunnel where you're just forgetting to take your breaks. And at some point, you don't even know if what you're currently doing is actually sounding better than what you had half an hour ago. How useful would it be then to be able to monitor previous mixer states, not by opening up a previous song version, but by double clicking? And instantaneously, everything in your mixer state is switched back to half an hour ago. Different inserts, different pans, different levels, so that you can once and for all determine if you're still on the right track with this mix or if it's really time to get out and take a walk around the block. So allow me to demonstrate. You can open up the mixer scenes by clicking on this symbol here in the console. And I already pre-configured 4 different scenes here, and I can do that by just clicking on the plus as soon as I have a mixer state that I want to preserve for later. Give a name, hit OK, and that's all I need to do. Once I store it, all of these options are going to be saved automatically. The visibility is going to be remembered of all the channels that are currently visible upon the moment of saving, all the insert effects that I had, all the volumes, pans, sends, mutes, and so forth. Recalling, however, is selective. So if I just want to have one specific thing from a different scene, I can recall that by simply unticking the boxes that I don't want to recall. Best of all, this is completely instantaneous. So even if I have completely different insert effect chains, I can still double click and change them around, and it just works great. So this is my mix scene called Start. As you can see and hear, pretty much nothing has happened so far. Almost all the faders, or actually all the faders are at unity, all the gain trims haven't been touched, just a little bit of bus routing prepared, and that's it. Now let's switch to the gain staged version. This was about half an hour later. Can immediately hear that the kick drum is much more prominent, the snare drum sounds a lot less boomy, everything is just well balanced. It's not just a level difference. right? If I just compensate here a bit. This is the original. Gain stage version is way tighter already. And usually I would first have to import some kind of guide track to confirm this, to double check this. No need to do this whatsoever, even as we're going into the mixing stage. Check it out. So let's go from the gain stage version to the one that I had after the first hour, so way later down the line. Right? Check out the amount of fat channels and EQs that were loaded without any noticeable delay. Incredible. So this really gives me the confidence to keep on mixing because I know I'm on the right track. And if I forget to take my much needed breaks, it might sound like this. Right, this is probably too much even for the biggest reverb enthusiast. But if I say there's something to like about this reverb actually, maybe the decay time or something like that. We also have a very easy way now in Studio One 5 to copy single channel settings back and forth. And to do this, you can just right click the channel that you want to copy and hit copy channel settings, much like you would do with a Microsoft Excel file, something like that. And you go back to the scene that you want to keep. In my case, it would definitely be the first hour mix. That was my favorite. And now I can just paste this channel over here and it takes everything about this channel from the previous scene while recalling everything else that was already great. It sounds like this. Pretty cool. And if we compare this one more time to where we started out, yeah, that's not even close. While we're on this mix, I also want to show you another cool new thing that we have in Studio One 5, which is the Listen Bus. This was requested by a lot of people, and you can open it up by clicking on the options wrench here in the console, and then scroll all the way down and click on Enable Listen Bus. Now, when the Listen Bus is set to the same output as our master, we can use this as our monitoring output that's not affecting our actual mix. So, for example, if we have some room correction software, such as SonarWorks Reference 4, and we want to apply that only for monitoring because we need it in this room we're sitting in, but we don't want to print it into the actual master, then the Listen Bus is perfect because we can just leave it there at all times and never have to worry about turning it off on mixdown. You can also use the Listen Bus in this scenario to apply some loudness plugins or push the volume all the way up in case you're gain staging at fairly conservative levels and you're not hearing it loud enough on your notebook. This will not squash your mix, as this is just for monitoring purposes and your mixdown stays completely unaffected. We can also use the Listen Bus, if we just click on the wrench tool once more, to solo through it. So when that is assigned to a different output, I'm just going to do this for demonstrational sake, you're not going to hear the actual result, then I'm able to solo individual channels without actually affecting the main mix. And this is great if you're working with somebody else, if you're maybe in a tracking situation and you can hear some kind of weird ringing on the snare, but you don't want to affect the entire mix of everybody else while you're fixing the problem. Here's another big one for all the MIDI guys out there, and this is a special shout out to all the people who approached me at last year's NAMM about it. Retrospective Record, and also MPE and polypressure support. All of this is here in Studio One 5. Let's check it out in action. And I'd say let's look at polypressure first. This essentially means that you have an independent pressure lane for every note. So if you, for example, assigned your aftertouch to the cutoff, every note of your chord can have a different filter intensity depending on how hard you're pressing down the note after you've played it. Especially demonstrated by my good friend Michael Feiner, who played this. Each of these notes has its own completely independent cutoff curve. So one of the lowest notes. Yeah, if you pay attention, you can really hear that every note has its own unique accent expressiveness to the max, if you ask me. Now, I don't have enough time in my presentation to also dive into MPE, unfortunately, but for all the users of Roly C-boards and other MPE devices, rest assured, Studio One is supporting. Okay, and now let's look at Retrospective Record and try to understand why this is such a big deal for so many users, even though the concept can be a bit confusing at first. Well, first of all, there's just people out there who have recording anxiety. That means that before the record button is hit, they are able to do the performance of their life. But once they're in this extraordinary recording situation, they suddenly just freeze up. They become a little bit uptight almost, and they lose all of their natural feel for the instrument. Also, the best ideas often happen during jamming, and it's not always possible to say, hey, that chord progression was amazing, do it exactly like you've done it just now, and I hit record. Maybe it's just gone and you have no idea what you just played. And that's exactly where Retrospective Record comes into the equation. Retrospective Record is the record that's always on. It's always running in the background, so you can never lose a great idea ever again. Let me show you. Now, there's so many other great improvements in version 5 that I wish I had the time to tell you about. For instance, that it's entirely possible now to insert as many instruments and effects as you want with just one keyboard hotkey, just like that. That was a Mai Tai and Pro EQ. Or how about the track filters, for that matter, that we now have? Open them up at the press of one hotkey, and then you just type whatever you want. Like, for example, if I only want to see the vocals in my song, I type vocals. There I go, I only see the vocals right now. If I only want to see the bass, I type bass, only see the bass right now. If I type in choir, I only see the choir, you get the idea. Or even much requested editing features we finally have that I've been asked about at NAMM all the time, such as no overlap when editing events. Yes, this is finally possible in Studio One, but unfortunately, this is all the time I have for today. Thank you so much for your attention. Enjoy the virtual NAMM and see you around.